Welcome to the quickest plot summary of Macbeth that you'll ever find. Hopefully they're some of my fabulous drawings, but this will be a quick whistle drop stop tour of what happens. So first of all, Act 1, Scene 1, the witches, thunder and lightning, and they talk about when they're going to meet again, but the main quote is this one: fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and filthy air. And it's about paradox and opposites, and it introduces the theme of deception, trickery that continues on all the way throughout. Now, this scene links to Act 1, Scene 3, because Macbeth's first ever words are fair and foul day I've not seen, or something like that we'll kind of figure out in a second. Right, so what have we got next? Now, the next thing that is set up is brave Macbeth. Well, he deserves that name. This is the bit which talks about Act 1, Scene 2, and it's a battle scene. Lots of violence, but Macbeth is not in it. This is a scene where we hear about Macbeth through the other characters. So Shakespeare sets up Macbeth as a noble, loyal, heroic character. Okay, and this is one of the main sections. So the sergeant reports on what has happened, and he uses incredibly positive language. But all's too weak for brave Macbeth. Well, he deserves that name. You've got this kind of image of his sword, which smoked with bloody execution, and you've got this really violent imagery. So although he is heroic, he is also a violent character. He's got the potential to carry out violence. Now, Duncan calls him a valiant cousin, worthy gentleman. So you've got lots of exclamatives here. But this positive imagery also shows how well he's respected by Duncan. So Duncan values him as a noble, loyal, heroic soldier. Now, the attack carries on, and we also get the sergeant saying, well, this battle's going on, and Duncan says, did this not trouble Banquo and Macbeth? And the sergeant then uses some imagery. So you can see some of my lovely pictures of an eagle and a lion. These are symbols of bravery. And he says that he uses the word double, 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 like really positive imagery to show that the amount of conflict that is being created by Macbeth, that he has created a scene where all the people that he has murdered, they're absolutely kind of there's wounds everywhere, there's blood everywhere, and this is being created by Macbeth. And he says they smack of honour both. Now, Duncan is very, very impressed, and now we get somebody else say something too. And Ross says that that the Thane of Cawdor, the old one, has been a traitor, and Macbeth has captured him, and Macbeth has overcome him. He uses this metaphor that he's called Bellona's bridegroom. So Bellona's the goddess of war, and Macbeth is her husband. So this kind of imagery shows his bravery and power. So we understand already in this scene, Act 1, Scene 2, that Macbeth is going to get promoted. He's going to become Thane of Cawdor. So this creates dramatic irony later on, because when the witches make their prophecy, we know that that's already that Macbeth that's already going to happen for him. So we know that the witches didn't create that. That was something that was always going to happen. So the next scene is Act 1, Scene 3. It's the witches again. And again, we've got thunder and pathetic fallacy, because every time the witches are on stage, Shakespeare creates a sinister, foreboding tone. That is because they're associated with disrupting the natural order. Witches were believed to have power over the weather. So he also does lots of spells, lots of like horrid little spells. We've got a rat without a tail. We've got loads and loads of spells. And these spells, the drum, the sounds, they kind of create that foreboding, dramatic, intense atmosphere. A drum, Macbeth does come. And then you've got them singing, and then Macbeth comes along. Now, when we first see the witches, we get the idea that they are not natural. Remember that when Macbeth is interested in them, he is ignoring the great chain of being and the natural order because he is interested in the supernatural. So we've got the paradox. So foul and fair a day have not seen, links to Act 1, Scene 1. And you've got a lot of the description of the witches. They do not look human. They're wild, withered, old. And he uses imperatives. Speak if you can. He's curious and intrigued. And they give him 3 prophecies straight away. Now, Banquo, he represents somebody who is good. He is a little bit suspicious of this all. However, he still asks for his own prophecy and prediction. Now, they make him some prophecies too. These are his prophecies. And this kind of sets up the conflict later on. Now, Macbeth is interested. He says, stay, you imperfect speakers, tell me more. Speak, I charge you. He uses imperatives and commands. He wants to know more. And whereas Banquo says, is a bit suspicious. He's cautious. He says, are we going mad? Have we eaten on the insane route? Like, have we eaten something that is making us kind of go a little bit crazy? Then we learn that Ross comes along and praises Macbeth and says that Macbeth is going to be promoted to Thane of Cawdor. Now, this is very, very interesting because this immediately increases attention. Banquo says, what, can the devil speak true? The fact that he calls him a devil shows that he knows something, that he kind of understands that they aren't somebody that you should listen to. Whereas Macbeth is completely silent. He's captivated by this. He says, Glamis and Thane of Cawdor, the greatest is behind, his private thought. But he calls it the greatest is behind. It kind of links this idea that the greatest means being king. This is his ambition that's starting to grow. It's a private thought. And Banquo again is more suspicious, and he says that these are instruments of darkness. Again, he shows that the witches are a symbol of evil, and they have evil actions. So Macbeth makes a little aside, the soliloquy on his own, and this is quite an important one because here he imagines killing the king, and he says that this supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good, and he talks about this horrid image that unfixes his hair. So when it means unfix his hair, it means that it makes his hair stand on edge. It makes his heart beat really, really fast. And what he's saying here is that this prediction from the witches has made him feel fear. He thinks about killing the king, and the questions that he's asking show his mental conflict because he doesn't know whether he should kind of follow through with ambition or if he should if he should respect the natural order and do what he knows is morally right. Now, Banquo keeps saying, look how this partner's wrapped up, spellbound. And Macbeth actually, at this point, leaves it to fate. So he's kind of saying that loyalty is going to win over ambition. That's his kind of idea, that loyalty is going to win. Now, what has also happened here is, in between here, is that Duncan has decided that his son Malcolm will be the next king. Now this, again, spurs Macbeth's ambition a bit more. He then says that quote, let not light see my black and deep desires, stars hide your fires. And this is the tragic flaw because he realises that he's going to need to kill, perhaps, or do something, overleap somebody in order to do his ambition. So his ambition kind of grows again. Now, he's written to Lady Macbeth. The first time we see Lady Macbeth, she's reading the letter that he's told, and he tells him about her. He treats her as an equal. He tells her about it straight away. And immediately we learn about what her opinion of Macbeth is, because she says Macbeth is too kind. And her reaction shows immediately that she's quite manipulative. She says that, I do fear thy nature is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. And she also says that I may pour my spirits in thine ear and chastise with the valour of my tongue. So what she's saying here is, I'm going to manipulate and convince Macbeth. And the fact that she only refers to herself with the word spirits is quite interesting, especially as she calls upon the spirits later on. And the golden round here means the crown. And she says that she's going to stop everything with the valour, with the kind of the cleverness of her tongue, and make sure that Macbeth does get the crown. So it shows that she's ambitious too. So we meet Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth then makes her speech. Come you spirits, unsex me here. There's lots of kind of violent imagery here about this one. About this thing. An interesting part is make thick my blood, stop the access and passage to remorse. She doesn't want to feel any sympathy or empathy for anybody. She wants to close up that emotional side of her. She also calls upon quite a lot of references to night, darkness, the supernatural, and again that symbolises that kind of that theme of deception, that they are not acting as good moral citizens, they are acting as immoral. Now this theme of deception is continued on here, where she uses some imagery. So Macbeth comes in and they meet. They see each other after he's been away in battle, and she says that your face is a book where men may read strange matters. So basically she's saying that he's easily read, and she's kind of like doing her first bit of manipulation. She says, look like an innocent flower, but really be a serpent. So she's kind of linking into this idea of deception. And she says, leave it into my dispatch. I will take control. So it shows the power is hers, and she uses the personal pronouns quite a lot. My, me, it's all about her. Then Duncan comes along to the castle, and there's a lot of dramatic irony, because Duncan believes this to be a place where you've got the honoured hostess, that she is all our service and every point twice double then double. It kind of shows that she's kind of capable of being manipulative, because she's acting incredibly lovely to Duncan, but actually she's planning something more. Now, the next scene, so where are we up to? Act 1, scene 7. This is Macbeth's conscience talking. He decides in a soliloquy that he's not going to kill the king because he's worried about the great chain of being and the natural order. He's worried he would go to hell. And that line is, we still have judgment here. That we but teach bloody instructions. He's worried about karma. He said he'd only do it if it was quick and successful, if there were no consequences. And he's saying that actually that this can just only lead to a hell-like existence. And he's saying that Duncan thinks of him as good, and Duncan is a good king, so Duncan's a really, really good king, and everyone will see him as evil if this carries on. So he's ambitious and he doesn't want to fail. So he says, we will proceed no further in this business, and Lady Macbeth then starts her assault. Was Hope drunk when you dressed yourself? Has it slept since? And she calls him a coward, and she insults his masculinity. She uses loads of rhetorical questions. Now Macbeth, if you look at it, Lady Macbeth speaks a lot, and Macbeth hardly speaks at all. Screw your courage to stick in place. So he kind of convinces her to commit this. So she, at the end here, he kind of decides, I'm settled and bend up. False face must hide what false heart does know. So he agrees to it. And then the next speech after this, it kind of links into the dagger speech. So Act 1, then it's Act 2. So Act 2, Scene 1, and Act 2 is the murder of Duncan. So you've got the dagger soliloquy. Is this the dagger which I see before me, the handle towards my hand? Now, this speech is just before Macbeth commits the crime. So here we learn more about his inner self. And it's interesting because quite a lot of the language here is similar to Lady Macbeth's language. There's a lot of references to spirits. There's a lot of imperatives. Come, let me clutch thee. the handle is like pointing towards him. But he also feels quite stressed. There's lots of plosives and sibilants and S sounds. And you could argue that stress could be the kind of the guilt or the kind of pressure that Lady Macbeth has put on to him. There's an interesting quote, nature seems dead. He's kind of rejecting the natural order. He's rejecting the natural world. He's being unnatural because he's following the supernatural. And he references the goddess of witchcraft there as well. And he says, hear not my steps. So he's becoming like a tyrant or a king. So the bell here symbolises change. I go when it is done, the bell invites me. It's a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. You've got these full stops, these end stops at the end, and it kind of symbolises this change, this tension. Now, the murder happens off stage. The reason why the murder happens off stage is if it happens on stage, it would be very hard for the audience to have any kind of empathy at the end. Now, because he's a tragic hero, we've got to feel some sort of empathy at the end. Then you've got a scene, the guilt scene, Act 2, Scene 2. Now, Lady Macbeth is kind of hearing things. There's a lot of references to kind of nature, kind of lots of sounds nature's making, as if it reflects. Shakespeare does this to reflect the fact that nature has been disturbed. And she has a little sense of fear. She's waiting to see what Macbeth does. Now, the first thing that Macbeth kind of says is he's like, did thou not hear a noise? He's killed the king, and he's starting to feel a little bit anxious. And he says that this is a sorry sight. He feels guilt straight away. Lady Macbeth tries to get him to snap out of it. A foolish thought to say it. And she has to go back in to kind of sort out the fact that he brought the daggers out, because they have to plant the daggers with the guards. And one of the things that Macbeth can't say straight away is, I cannot say amen. And it shows the guilt, because he's committed regicide. He's gone against the natural chain of being. And he keeps repeating, why couldn't I say it? He also kind of repeats this idea that he can't sleep. So sleep is also a motif for the fact that he's disrupted the natural order. So now he's not at peace. It shows his mental conflict, and it predicts that there will be a breakdown. And Lady Macbeth almost predicts this and says, so it will make us mad. Macbeth carries on saying, sleep no more, sleep no more. And he goes on about this. This guilt is really overwhelming in this scene. And she's kind of saying, you're making yourself brain sickly. Ironically, again, she is the one that ends up unsickly. And she says, wash this filthy witness from your hand. And that, again, is a metaphor. So she goes back inside and she says, give me the daggers. I will sort this out. The knocking carries on in this scene. And it's almost like knocking from hell. But actually, it ends up being something quite light-hearted. But the knock-in, it emphasises Macbeth's feel. So this hyperbolic metaphor, will all great Neptune's ocean wash his blood clean from my hands, talks about how he's feeling immense amount of guilt here. Now, Lady Macbeth says she feels no guilt. She says, I've got bloody hands, but I'm not going to pretend that I'm innocent. I feel my guilt. I own the guilt. It's fine. And she says, a little water clears us of this deed. How easy it is then. She thinks it's easy to get rid of your guilt. How easy is it? All right. Now, this again becomes ironic because later she finds this difficult to understand because she says out damn spot out, and she's overwhelmed by her guilt. It leads to paranoia and her death. So the next scene is the comedic character. It relieves the tension. It was a very, very tense scene. It relieves the tension. So that's Act 3. Then you've got Macduff. Now, Macduff comes along and is asking, where is the king? And we get this idea that there was a lot of disruption outside last night. There was chaos and disruption.